Howdy! Sometimes it feels like every second food additive out there is supposedly going to kill us. And occasionally, countries get suspicious enough about a certain food ingredient that they'll outright ban it and any foods that contain it. And America is often home to some of these banned foods. And I'm keen to take a look at these with you today. So let's check out 10 USA foods banned overseas. And just a note that while I was making this, I noticed that Weird History Food already did a video like this recently. I think they did a great job, but I wanted to give my own take. I'm gonna try and look at peer-reviewed scientific studies to determine which of these foods actually have evidence for being dangerous. Or maybe the foods are actually safe, and the countries are just being extra cautious. And if you are concerned about a particular food, I strongly recommend talking to your doctor or your dietitian directly. Absolutely always take your doctor's advice first. Anyway, let's begin. For number 10 we have Fruit Loops. When you think of Fruit Loops or Fruity Pebbles, you might think of lots of colourful food dyes. And today we'll be hearing about the most infamous of these food dyes. I'd like to introduce you to Yellow number 5 and Yellow number 6. These two are kind of celebrities for all the controversy they've caused. You see, Yellow 5 and 6 are in Fruit Loops, and past studies have claimed that Yellow 5 and 6 increase ADHD symptoms. As a result, Yellow 5 and 6 have been banned in Norway, Finland, Austria, France, and the UK. In case you don't know, ADHD is a common behavioral disorder that affects up to 7% of kids and many adults. Someone with ADHD can have behavioral symptoms like inattention, inability to sit still, hyperactivity, or being impulsive. However, a lot of food we have has artificial dyes like these. And since ADHD is so common, I wanted to look very carefully at the scientific studies on this. Rigorous studies looked to see if hyperactivity was caused by Yellow 5 and 6, all throughout the 80s and 90s. Unfortunately, the evidence was inconsistent. But in 2011, a peer-reviewed literature review was done by the International Life Science Institute. Their findings included this.
Hey, we found that only a portion of children had more ADHD symptoms when they had food dyes in their diet. Yeah!
So before removing all food dyes from your diet or your family's diet, maybe give it a test run first. Results may differ from person to person. For some people, dyed foods like Fruit Loops might increase ADHD symptoms. For others, it might make no difference at all. Personally, I think the ridiculous amount of sugar in Fruit Loops and Fruity Pebbles is much bigger concern than their food dyes. Fruit Loops are nearly 30% sugar, so personally, I'd cut back on them just to save the waistline. As for the supposed cancer and disease risks, well, let's talk more about those in the next banned food. And for number 9 we have Pop-Tarts. Surprise, surprise, it's our favourite food colourings again. Yellow 5 and Yellow 6. I mean, given what sugary sugar jobs these pastries are, it's probably not a huge surprise that they were banned. But it turns out, as well as Yellow 5 and 6, Pop-Tarts also contain Red 40. Jeebus, that's a whole rainbow of worries right there. Or is it? Now, obviously, Pop-Tarts are deemed safe to eat in the USA, but they are banned in the European Union, Austria, and Norway for their food dyes. So let's take a closer look at why these additives were banned. For Yellow 5, the concern is basically the same for what we found in Fruit Loops. The link they found in some studies between food coloring and ADHD symptoms. When I researched it myself, I found an interesting literature review by the Society of Neurotherapeutics, basically summarizing all the past research done. Similar to what we found in Fruit Loops, their findings were as follows.
Yellow number 5 can sometimes have a small behavioural effect on kids, whether ADHD or not, but it varied from person to person. There's a genetic factor.
So similar to previous studies, some people might be a little affected by the food dyes, while others not at all. So once again, I'd recommend you monitor for the symptoms yourself and decide based on that. If you notice you can't pay attention or you're hyperactive, maybe cut down on the Pop-Tarts. But what about the fears of cancer in food dyes and their toxic effects? Well, I found peer-reviewed studies for Yellow number 6 in Science Direct and in the National Library of Medicine. They fed rats a ridiculous amount of Yellow 6 for a month. and their study found no abnormalities, toxicity, or cancer. Similar studies were done for yellow 5 and red 40 with similar results. A couple of these studies did find that dyes could have toxic contaminants, but in harmless trace amounts. And finally, we have red 40, the gold standard for safe dyes. World Health Organization has approved this dye as well as the European Union, and they ban a lot of stuff. So with these 3 food dyes, there's a lack of evidence of toxic effects. And best to judge for yourself if it makes you or others have ADHD symptoms or hyperactivity. But personally, I'd still keep Pop-Tarts an occasional treat. While Fruit Loops are 28% sugar, Pop-Tarts somehow manages to beat this revolting score with 32% sugar. Almost a third of Pop-Tarts are pure, concentrated sugar. And we're worrying about the food dyes? There's plenty of evidence that excess sugar is bad. So personally, I'd still keep Pop-Tarts a sometimes food. And next at number 8 we have American milk for bovine growth hormones. Milk from the USA has a controversial reputation. And no, in this case, is not due to the antibiotics. Some cows are also given something called a recombinant bovine growth hormone, aka RBGH. It's marketed to dairy farmers to increase milk production in cows. The FDA has already approved it as safe way back in 1993, but countries like Canada and the European Union, of course, completely ban it. As you might know, our human brains make growth hormones too. RBGH is just the cattle version of this, but made in a lab. So the main concern of this RBGH was, does people drinking RBGH result in them getting growth hormones too? Well, as Professor Aaron Carroll would say,
let's waste no time. To the research.
The American Cancer Society, what I personally consider a very trusted source, summarized the information they read on peer-reviewed studies in this. And this is what they found.
Bovine growth hormones are not active in humans. So even if humans absorbed it drinking milk, it should have no effect at all.
Then I see no reason not to give you a glass of milk.
Yay!
Some studies found that people who drank this milk had higher levels of growth hormones, but they also found the same result in people who drank soy milk. Yeah, soy milk, the plant-based milk, gave them growth hormones apparently. Even in the absolute worst case scenario, they found that people drinking the max amount of milk they could were only absorbing about 0.09% of cow growth hormones, matching their human growth hormones. So barely a thing. But what about the big scary word cancer? Always a popular word for getting attention with these type of foods. Early studies thought they found a relationship between these growth hormones and cancer, but later studies just couldn't replicate this. And if it can't be repeated, it's not a scientific study. So at this point, it seems like drinking milk that has this trace amount of growth hormone in it makes no difference as if you were to just drink plant milk. I respect Canada and EU's decision to not have it and play it safe, but don't feel worried if you are drinking milk with bovine growth hormones. Chances are you'll be perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be organic, it can just be regular old milk. Butterflies drink the tears of things. Animals are weird, we do weird stuff. It works for us. I can assure you, sugary soft drinks like Coke and Pepsi are way worse for your health and your teeth. Personally, I choose skim milk as it's low calories and just as nice. And coming in at number 7, boxed mac and cheese. Aww, et tu mac and cheese? It may not massively surprise you, but the ever-yellow mac and cheese has a dreaded yellow 5 in it. And yellow 6 tagged along too. He couldn't get a date. So Kraft mac and cheese was banned in Austria, Norway, and some other European countries. And you know the drill with our yellow buddies, possible hyperactivity, but varies from person to person. No concrete cancer risks found. The only other issue studies have found with yellow is allergic reactions, such as itching and hives. However, when the FDA looked over these studies, they found that allergic reactions are very rare. And people are just as likely to get this allergic reaction in other things with yellow number 5 in it, such as desserts, soft drink, or even makeup. However, there is good news from Kraft. As of 2015, Kraft removed these artificial dyes from all their mac and cheese. Sorry guys, you'll have to go elsewhere. See you. Instead, they've gone for coloring ingredients like turmeric or paprika. Nice! In fact, they specifically made this change because of the European Union, since, as we know, yellow 5 is banned there. but now all countries are able to enjoy their mac and cheese. And for number 6 we have Gatorade. Oh boy. There is so much misinformation in sports drinks, I don't know where to start. Apologies ahead if I seem pretty over-passionate about this one. Gatorade ads are giving misinformation to people trying to better their life, trying to exercise, and that really makes me mad. To begin, Gatorade contains our good friends, yep, that's right, Yellow 5 and 6. Welcome back, guys. Hello! So Austria and Norway have completely banned Gatorade. As we've seen, there's some evidence that the Yellow Brothers can cause hyperactivity, but say it with me, it varies from person to person. But that's actually not my biggest problem with these stupid drinks, not by a mile. I wonder if there's more reasons Austria and Norway don't like these stupid sports drinks. I know I don't. I've got a bone to pick with Pepsi. In case you don't know, because it's relevant to this, I'm someone who's been doing gym workouts and marathon running for about 12 years. And all that time, I've seen these stupid drinks advertised in my face endlessly. If you ever go to the gym, sports and protein drink advertising is just this unavoidable tidal wave of garbage constantly crashing in your face. All the advertisements like to say,
"Get electrolytes back. Our drink is packed with electrolytes. Yay!"
But many people don't even know what an electrolyte is.
It's got electrolytes.
What are electrolytes? Do you even know?
Spoiler, it's salt, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. That's it, and it can be found in a lot of other things. In fact, you could have a single piece of fruit instead, a banana. Or you could have a glass of skim milk, or you could have fruit juice, coconut water, or just a smoothie. There's lots of stuff that has electrolytes. Gatorade isn't special. It just uses buzzwords to mislead well-meaning sports customers. Plus, many people doing sports or gym are unlikely to need more than water after a workout. Unless you're doing over 45 minutes, just water is normally fine. And even if it is over 45 minutes, personally, I've run marathons on straight water, fruit, and potatoes. I mean, if you like sports drinks, more power to you, but they certainly aren't necessary. So why all this bullcrap? Well, BMJ Clinical Research did an investigation, and they discovered some of these sports science studies have been paid by companies like Gatorade. In fact, there's an entire freaking Gatorade Sports Science Institute. A science institute run by Pepsi. Definitely no conflicts of interest there. See, I don't just get mad at Coca-Cola. Pepsi is at least half as evil. They tried to exploit my best friend's science. I'm sorry, but figure of speech. You know you're my best friend. Hey! I can have 2 best friends. Give over, you 2. Anyway, Pepsi wants people to think that their sports drinks are essential for people doing sport. But it turns out they're not. In fact, sports drinks like Gatorade are 36% pure sugar. I am serious. That's more sugar than a freaking Mars bar, by a significant amount. Mind you, I'm not saying have a Mars bar instead of Gatorade. I'm saying when you're exercising, you're working hard enough as is. Regardless of what Pepsi keeps telling us, we don't need to fuel ourselves with overly sugary drinks. And for number 5, we have Drumstick Ice Cream. Huh, really? What mysterious ingredients did Drumstick use to get banned? Well, it turns out the European Union banned Drumstick ice cream for the use of carrageenan. And unless you're really into vegetarian dishes, you might not know what that is. Carrageenan is basically an extract from a red edible seaweed known as Irish moss. It's actually already been used in cooking for hundreds of years. It's even vegan friendly if you're into that sort of thing. It's one of the ingredients that can give an ice cream its smooth texture. Sounds fine, right? Well, around 2001, a scientist presented evidence that this red seaweed is toxic and caused inflammation in rat digestion and colon cancer. However, a correspondence was added pointing out that this effect was specific to the guts of rats, and no toxic effects could be found when tried in human guts. And even putting that aside, an equally respected scientist did a study on this in 2002 and found many flaws in the previous study. Later long-term studies couldn't even find this toxic effect in rodents. So apparently, even the rats can eat the seaweed. Yay for them. For peace of mind, this carrageenan is also recognized as safe by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. overall, from what I've read in research, I feel quite confident in saying you can enjoy your ice cream without worrying about the dangers of seaweed. And coming in at number 4, fat-free chips. Personally, I believe that sweeteners and fat alternatives may be one of our ultimate keys to fighting the obesity epidemic. But occasionally there's a chemical used that gets a bad reputation. In this case, it's known as olestra, also known as olein.
Bring back Lay's Wow chips with olestra.
Olestra is basically a fake fat that can be added to things like chips to lower their calories. In fact, olestra chips are half the calories of regular chips and completely fat-free. And that does sound great. However, chips like fat-free Pringles and Yes chips have all been banned in Canada and the UK. Why though? Well, as you might know from the notorious Frito-Lay Wow chips, these chips can make a person go wow, with nightmarish diarrhea.
Mr. Griffin, those chips were recalled in the 90s for causing explosive diarrhea.
But at the same time, many companies like Procter & Gamble believed olestra was a miracle ingredient. For example, food company owner Hercules Sargelis claimed,
Olestra is the single most important development in the history of food.
"Whoa, that's high praise, Chief." Unfortunately, in reality, there were thousands of reports of stomach cramps and diarrhea. And UK and Canada wanted none of that. But once again, let's look at more than just hearsay and see what the scientific evidence says. It's our old buddies at the National Library of Medicine. What do you got for us? Never mind. In this study, olestra is being used as a super powerful laxative to reverse poisoning.
Explosive diarrhea.
I mean, that's wonderful for medicine, but kind of failing its original purpose. And it turns out olestra can temporarily block the absorption of important vitamins, such as vitamin A and vitamin D, as well as nutrients like lycopene. This study from the Oxford Academic had similar results. So judging from what I've read here, I can't say I recommend olestra chips. I mean, if you don't mind nightmarish diarrhea, it's not going to cause you any long-term harm, but they may temporarily block you from absorbing the important vitamins in your gut, and you may want to get a magazine rack for your toilet. And for number 3 we have Ritz crackers. If you have a cracker craving and you like Ritz, don't expect to find them in Hungary, Switzerland, Austria, Iceland, Norway or Denmark. All these countries have banned Ritz. But why? Well, in this case, I wouldn't touch certain Ritz flavors either. The reason Ritz are banned in so many places is some of their products contain trans fats. You see, products like Ritz Bits contain hydrogenated cottonseed oil, which is absolutely a trans fat. But due to a technical loophole, Ritz is allowed to mislead consumers on this. They can actually put that there's 0 grams of trans fat in their product when there actually is. This is the same for any product that has less than half a gram of trans fat per serving. Unfortunately, as these countries know, trans fats are bad news and any amount should be avoided. The science is pretty clear on trans fats that it's like the worst fat ever.
But the trans fat is just terrible. It is the worst.
The National Library of Medicine has many studies showing a direct connection with trans fats to cardiovascular disease, breast cancer, colon cancer, diabetes, and more. The majority of studies state that a person's trans fat intake should aim to be 0. Fortunately, because of all these bans on trans fat foods, most companies are going the route of 0 trans fats in their products nowadays. For example, back in the past, KFC used to use hydrogenated vegetable oil, which is absolutely a trans fat. But in recent years they've started using canola oil, which has no trans fats. I mean, deep fried stuff is never going to be great for you, but it's better than it was. But Ritz still isn't following this trend quite yet with all their products. The original flavor Ritz cracker now uses canola oil instead, so they're getting there. So maybe go for the original flavor as an alternative, and not Ritz Bits. And coming in at number 2, Frosted Flakes. Not Frosted Flakes 2. So many people already eat this cereal. In fact, it's the second most popular cereal in America, with 132 million boxes sold per year. In case you're curious, number 1 was Cheerios. However, Frosted Flakes have been banned in both Japan and, of course, the European Union. And with so many people eating this cereal, I really wanted to give as accurate information as possible. So what is the culprit of this ban? No, it's not yellow fire for once. The culprit is in fact BHT. And purely for your amusement, I'm going to attempt to state the full non-shortened version of this name. Butylated butylated hydroxytoluene. Butylated hydroxytoluene. Huh, thanks, Boo. Guess I'm getting better at these. So, butylated hydroxytoluene is a preservative commonly found in gum, processed meat, and snack foods. Ever since 1954, it's been used in foods to stop it going smelly or losing its flavor. So is it safe? Well, let's start with what the FDA says. They say BHT is safe for use in foods in limited approved amounts. They looked at the average amount of BHT in an American diet and found no problems. However, these results have been more mixed in animals outside humans. The first study I found was done by the US National Toxicology Program, and they gave rats huge amounts of BHT for 2 years straight. And the results in this study was that the rats were no different than the rats given the regular diet. However, in another study in the National Library of Medicine, rats were once again given huge amounts of BHT. But this time they had problems like cholesterol and liver growth. But in the studies on humans that I could find, BHT was just shown to cause skin irritation and eye irritation, which is still bad, but it definitely could be worse. So on this one, I apologize because I wanted to give you a concrete answer, but I can't say I'm 100% sure either way. That being said, I don't think a little BHT is something to worry about. From these studies, I personally agree with the FDA that BHT is okay for humans in limited amounts. If you do want to play it safe though, most foods that contain BHT do list it on the label. And if you're worried about it in Frosties, maybe just try an alternative cereal. Frosties isn't the healthiest cereal though, so chances are the sugar is going to cause us more problems than the BHT. And coming in at number 1, M&Ms. Why M&Ms? Clearly there's got to be some sort of nefarious ingredient here.
Actually, honey, they said that the chocolates were too similar to another chocolate on the Swedish market.
It's got to be here somewhere. Bromine, BHT, BHA, trans fats.
Honey, I'm pretty sure it's just a copyright similarity. You see, there's this Swedish chocolate company called M by Mondelez that...
Aha! Here it is! M&Ms contain 1% corn syrup. Clearly that is why it's banned. That evil, nefarious corn syrup. Honey, does this mean I can debunk corn syrup?
Sure, honey. You go ahead.
So, corn syrup is a sugar substitute that has been notoriously demonized throughout history. So many claims have been made that corn syrup causes more weight gain than sugar. Some have even claimed that it causes a higher risk of diabetes. However, as this National Library of Medicine systematic review points out, the majority of these claims are based on speculation from limited data and animal studies. They found no difference between how our guts process sugar and corn syrup. In other words, they found that both are just as bad in large quantities. Both sugar and corn syrup contain the exact same amount of calories, glucose, fructose, and sweetness. Nutritionally, studies have found them to be basically identical. But what about these claims of increased risk of heart disease? Well, this study's from 2013, so let's see if we can find any more recent studies. Here we go, this one's from 2022. This systematic review did find that there was no difference in weight gain. However, a couple of studies did find a small increase in inflammation compared to sugar. This is also known as an AC reactive protein test. However, I couldn't personally find another study replicating this issue, but maybe there is one out there. The majority of studies I found couldn't find any difference between equal amounts sugar and corn syrup. However, some countries are playing it safe, such as the UK and some European countries, and they're completely limiting the use of it, such as, of course, M&Ms. M&Ms are a little under 2% corn syrup, so I wouldn't fret too much about corn syrup in this one. But if you do want to be extra careful, just take a look at the back of the box. It's normally listed as glucose syrup or corn syrup on the ingredients list. Nowadays, in fully developed countries, the safety and hygiene of our food is higher than it's ever been in human history. As you've seen here, many painstaking scientific studies are done for us, sometimes for decades. It's often to assure we're given foods free of toxic side effects. I mean, some people could aim to eat a little healthier. 90% of Americans and 95% of Australians don't eat enough vegetables every day. But the majority of grocery foods nowadays aren't gonna be inherently toxic. And if you're listening this far, I appreciate you sticking with this vid that has a bit more dry scientific studies than I'd usually have. But nothing gets me more excited than the idea that I might have taught you something helpful. If you're curious at looking at some of these scientific studies yourself and doing your own research, I recommend ScienceDirect.com or Google Scholar. Misinformation may be at an all-time high, but we have a shield against it right in front of us. We have more proper scientific answers at our fingertips now than ever before in human history. A lot of the time, it's just a matter of people trying to use it. Anyway, heavy subject aside, please look after yourself and each other. And as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully I might see you next time.